Ingrid Betancourt was campaigning in the Colombian presidential election. She was on her way to San Vicente, south of Bogota, where she was kidnapped by the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, also known as FARC. Ingrid spent the next 6.5 years as their prisoner until, in the middle of 2008, she was rescued. She's written about her ordeal in Even Silence Has an End, My 6 Years of Captivity in the Colombian Jungle, and Ingrid joins me in the Life Matters studio. Welcome.
Hello, Richard.
What happened that day?
Everything went wrong. Everything that we had planned just went wrong. We had this trip to San Vicente in our schedule, in the agenda of the campaign since a month before the day this happened. And we were supposed to get to this village because it was the place where the peace talks between the FARC, the guerrilla, and the government was going to, was happening. The peace talks were happening in San Vicente. But 2 days prior to my visit, the process just ended abruptly. And the president of Colombia at the time, Pastrana, had been accused of having given too much to the guerrillas, especially a territory that he had granted them in order to have them come and sit to this table of negotiations. So once the process was over, he was very adamant in proving to the country that he could recover this territory from the hands of the FARC. So he launched this military operation, and he warned the FARC that they had to evict the zone in 48 hours. When I planned my trip to San Vicente, it was at the last hours of those 48 hours where everything was supposed to be under control by the government. I landed in another city in the south of Colombia called Florencia, and from there I had to take the road to San Vicente. And once I landed to Florencia, the president was going to go to San Vicente at the same time, the same day, exactly at the same moment I was going to go to San Vicente. But I was from the opposition, so probably he didn't want me to be there at the same time as he was. And he ordered the bodyguards to abandon the mission of coming with me. And I thought this was kind of a blackmail. And I thought, if every time I have to go somewhere, the government is going to just take out my security in order to prevent me from reaching the place I need to be for my campaign, I mean, democracy is over. I mean, the government will control all the campaigns. So I decided to just stick to the plan and go to San Vicente without my escort.
Did you know how dangerous it was, or were you thinking it was safer?
I thought it was safer because I saw soldiers all over the place. I had been to San Vicente 100 times, and it was the first time I could see, I mean, there were Black Hawks flying over the road like every 20 minutes. They were taking off of they were doing the shuttle between Florencia and San Vicente. Soldiers all over the place. We went through a military checkpoint, and everything seemed normal. The traffic, they let everybody go through that checkpoint. Nobody said anything about, being this like a dangerous place or moment at all. But the curious thing is that once I was abducted, everything was like erased. And I think that the government at that time, the Colombian government, thinking that they were going to be held responsible for my kidnapping, they decided to rewrite the story. So they said that I had been warned, that I knew that the FARC were waiting for me.
That you'd done it on purpose?
That I did it on purpose.
Right.
They said at the beginning, they also said that I wanted to get higher in the polls. So that's why I wanted to be abducted. Of course, after 6 years and a half, they couldn't just maintain that story. But
no. So you were taken deep into the jungle, and you had to walk the final part of that journey to the first camp you'd be held in. What were the living conditions like?
Well, they were very basic. I mean, we would live in an open space. We would sleep in hammocks when that was possible. If not, we would just sleep in the ground. We would have mosquito nets. That was very important because this is a zone of malaria. We would sleep under tents. The food was always the same. It was rice and beans. There was no vegetables, no dairies, no fruits, no meat. Right?
I'll talk more about that in a minute. But you grew up in Paris, and you had a fairly privileged upbringing and lifestyle. How much of a shock was it to go to the conditions that you've just been talking about?
Well, it was a deep shock. But it was a deep shock not only because I had or known this privileged, let's say, childhood, because you see, I was held hostage with guys that were soldiers, policemen. There were Americans that had been in the Marines. I mean, tough guys.
Yeah, they found it hard too.
And they were suffering as I was.
Yeah.
I mean, it was hard for everybody. It was even hard for the guerrillas, who had, some of them were born in the jungle. I mean, the jungle is a very difficult environment. I don't think we're really made, or we're not made anymore to live in those conditions. Let's say that the nature is too overwhelming.
Yes. And you really bumped into some of that because you escaped, and you escaped several times. And for the early part of your captivity, you were held with your associate Clara, and you tried to escape together, but the relationship became strained, didn't it?
Yes, it was a very difficult relationship with Clara, not because of her or because of me, because I would say the situation. I mean, we were confronted to an experience that was, none of us was prepared to live this. We were forced to sleep in a very small space that we had to share. We had to stay under this mosquito net in a I would say the size of a cradle, 24 hours a day. I mean, if I would move, I would bump into her. If she would sneeze, she would wake me up. We had to do everything together. And I think that cohabitation, this kind of forced life, sharing everything, made us enter in a mode that was like an isolation mode. We didn't, after months of living in this condition, we needed to be alone, and we couldn't because the other one was so near.
Yes.
So we built this, I think, I would say it was like a wall of silence. We didn't talk to each other. We wanted just to be in our. We couldn't change the life we had. We couldn't change the conditions, but at least we could make it easier if we were pretending to be alone.
On Life Matters today, my guest is Ingrid Betancourt, who was kidnapped and held in the Colombian jungle for 6 years, more than 6 years actually, and we're hearing about really the beginning of that, the first year of that. And interestingly, in the book you've written, Ingrid, it begins with the fourth attempt at escape, but this was in December. You'd been captured in February, so you clearly were not resigned to your fate.
No.
At that point.
No, I never resigned to my fate. And I think that was also, this explains also why between my companions and I, there was this, let's say, difficult relation, because I was completely obsessed with getting back home. And for some of my companions, the choice was different. They wanted to make the best they could in the life they had to cope with. To
endure it in a way.
Yes. So they were into adapting. I was into fleeing. And of course we were sharing the same conditions. So everything I would do would affect them. Everything they would do would affect me. And I think this explains a lot what happened between us.
Yes, because as well as being stroppy and difficult and causing trouble, really, you made lots of requests. You refused to cooperate. You were also the highest profile prisoner.
Yes. I think that for me there were things that I could not accept. I mean, I know that for some of my companions, because after Clara I was in captivity with other people. The issue was to stay alive. For me, staying alive was, of course, good, but it was not good enough. I needed to stay alive in conditions that would meet my expectations of dignity. I couldn't accept to lower myself to a point that I would be ashamed of what I've lived. That was something that for me was really important. And sometimes they were treating us in a way that was so humiliating and difficult to confront that I was scared that this could just produce brain damage. I mean, soul damage more than brain damage, soul damage.
And even more immediate, you write about when they were trying to make you all answer to a number rather than a name.
Yes.
And you're taking the stand about that and saying, I won't do it. Now, I know that some of the other hostages were not happy about that because they thought there'd be punishments and retributions. But you thought that if we accept this, we are further dehumanized. It's easier to kill us.
Yes. For me, that was very clear when it was a morning. In fact, it was the first morning we were brought to this jungle prison. It was a very hard moment for all of us, and we didn't know each other. We were 10 prisoners put together in this compound and forced to just share everything in a very small space. And in the morning, 2 guards came the other side of the fence. This was with barbed wires, watchtowers. I mean, a very dreadful space. And they shouted, "Number yourselves." And I didn't know what they were asking from us until I saw my companions beginning numbering themselves. So the first one, the nearest to the fence, said 1, the second said 2, and so on and so forth, until my turn. And then I said my name. I said Ingrid Betancourt. And so there was this kind of very critical moment where the guards became very aggressive. And I said, look, if you want to know if I'm here, you call me by my name and I will answer. This was a very difficult moment for me because my companions, after this, thought I was being haughty, that my attitude...
A princess.
Yes, that I was acting like a princess and that I was thinking that I was more than the others, that I could not, act like the group. And I said, I'm sorry, I cannot accept this. I cannot accept to just play the game that I'm a number, because then it will be, it will damage all of us, and it will, of course, make them the task easier to control us and to just dominate us.
As I mentioned, you were difficult, you escaped, you had attitude, you stood up to them, you made demands. How did they react to that? Did they punish you?
Yes,
Did they beat you?
I had violent moments with them. Yes, they were hard. Not all the time, but times that for me were very difficult to just cope with. They could be violent. They were humiliating. They were cruel. And this was a relationship that would degrade with the time. Every time there was a new group, the FARC would change the guards once in a while. And whenever there was a change of guards, of group, at the beginning they would try to be, respectful and decent. But after 3 weeks, it was over. I mean, they were very, very nasty. And I would say that for a woman, it was even more pathetic, because it was not only being a prisoner, but being a woman prisoner. And this is a very machist organization.
Yes.
So it was difficult.
Were you concerned that they might assault you in an intimate way?
I had to fight with them in many, many ways. And I remember once I could see how because those were kids. The problem was also that my guards were, they were between 14 years old and 18 years old.
Yeah.
So but they had guns, and they were strong guys, much more stronger than what I could be. So they would treat me in a manner that was difficult, and I could see the difference between them treating guys and them treating me. So it came to a point where I had to react physically, and to just fight against them. And I was chained 24 hours a day by the neck for the next 4 years.
Do you still have the mark?
Physically, I have a little mark. In my dreams, I still have marks.
I can understand that. On Life Matters today, we are speaking with Ingrid Betancourt, who went through a truly extraordinary time. She was kidnapped, she was held in the jungle by terrorists in Colombia for 6 years, more than 6 years, and we're hearing about that, about some of the things that happened to her. Did you ever give up hope that you would be free again? I mean, 6 years is a long time. You'd had several escapes. Ultimately, none of them were successful.
Yes, but I always thought every time I was recaptured, there was this depression thing. It was very hard. But then what kept me going was thinking, okay, I'm learning. I'm just learning. One day I will be ready and I will succeed. I never lost hope. I always, even though I had this moment where I thought I was going to die because I was very ill, and the FARC refused to give me any medicine. And I was like losing control of my health, of my body. And then I thought...
And getting weaker.
Well, it came to a point I couldn't move, so it was really, it was bad. But then I thought, this is going to be my liberation. I thought that death could be also a way of escaping from them. And for me, the most important thing was to give to my children the opportunity to be happy again, and I thought, at least if they know it's over, they will continue their life and they will be able to be free themselves. Now, I'm so glad it didn't happen. And I'm so glad I'm here. Yeah.
You sometimes heard on the radio. Sometimes you had access to a radio. It must have been very odd to be occasionally having glimpses of the world. I think you even followed the 2006 World Football
Yes,
Cup.
absolutely, absolutely.
But you heard from your daughter and...
Yeah, and from my mom especially. You see, in Colombia there are thousands of hostages for economic purposes. We were for political purposes. They wanted to trade us for guerrillas prisoners. But because of the amount of hostages, there are radio programs devoted to broadcast the messages of the families to those people, not knowing if they're hearing the messages through the radio or not. But my mother went to those programs every day, and they were very early in the morning. They would start from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. And she would wake up at 4 to just get the phone and get in line in order to be able to...
Yes.
Because there were thousands of people calling those programs. And every day I could hear her voice with a message, always the same introduction words, something like, I love you, my dear. I hope you're listening to me and that you're dry and that you have slept in a comfortable place and that you're healthy. And then she would tell me what she was going to do during the day, or she would tell me about my children, how they were doing.
That would have been bittersweet.
Oh, it was so important.
Because they were growing up. They changed so much in the time you were away.
Well, for me, thinking about my children was a torture. And I know that in the first years of this captivity, at least I would say the first 3 years, I refused to think about them because it was too much for me. I lost my father.
That was early, wasn't it?
Very early, yeah. He died a month, hour to hour, a month after my abduction. And the way I was I got to know the news was kind of scary too. I mean, very hard for me. So I was always afraid that something would happen to the ones I loved.
Yes.
And in a way, it's very strange. And when I'm hearing what I'm going to say, I know it can feel strange for people, but I could accept that my mom, I could accept her suffering because she was my mom, but I couldn't accept the suffering of my children.
I can understand that. I think that's a very human response. Now, you were eventually rescued midway through 2008 in a remarkable sting operation, actually, where
Incredible, yeah.
Colombian soldiers and police infiltrated FARC and led them to believe you had to be transported to another camp in a helicopter, not just you, or all of you. And that must have been an extraordinary day. And I'm wondering, actually, when they said to you, you are free, did you believe them?
It was an incredible moment. Yes, we had come to this helicopter thinking that we were going to be transferred to another camp deeper in the jungle. So we were desperate. I mean, it was a very difficult moment for all of us. And as the helicopter took altitude, there was this fight that began inside the helicopter, and I couldn't understand what was happening. It was a fight because two of the commanders of the FARC came into the helicopter with us, and the crew of the helicopter that was supposed to be FARC allies.
Yes.
And suddenly they were fighting, and the two commanders of the FARC were neutralized. And the I would say the chief or the commander of the group of the helicopter crew shouted, "Somos el ejército de Colombia. Están libres." And every time I think about this moment, it just shakes me because...
We are the Colombian army and you are free.
Yes, we are the Colombian army. You are free. And then I remember I screamed like I've never screamed before in my life. And as I was screaming, I was thinking, oh, I'm screaming. I shouldn't be doing this. This is very strange because I don't want to scream. I have to just control myself. And I couldn't. I mean, the scream was like a very primitive and instinctive reaction because it took time for me to understand what that meant. And I think the scream was like the pressure I had accumulated over all those years coming out. And also the fear of just, now I'm free, and now what? What am I going to find in this world that I left so many years ago?
Well, that's it. I mean, you land and you see your children, and obviously those were the people you miss the most, but they had grown and changed. They had lives that you didn't know about. How difficult was it to reconnect?
Well, nothing is difficult for me now. I have to admit that today everything is like an incredible opportunity of growing. But
that first year would have been hard, I think.
It was amazingly beautiful, even if it had moments that were not easy. But because it was all built on love, and love makes everything easier, I think. It you know, with my daughter, it was perhaps easier because we connected immediately. When I came out from the jungle, I had nothing to wear. And here she was.
I've come out of the jungle and I've got nothing to wear.
Yeah. I had just, the things, I mean,
that you had on your back.
That I had on my back. It was, and then, and when I saw her, she said, "Okay, what do you need?" And I said, "Well, some pants and a t-shirt." And she just took her things and she gave them to me. And we had exactly the same size. So it was very, very funny to just be wearing the same things all the time. And then the first things I got, I was thinking, okay, I'll pick this shirt or this sweater and it will fit her. I mean, it was, always. So it was, the complicity came immediately with her. With my son, it was a little difficult because I left him he was 13 years old. He was a boy. And when I came back, he was a man with his life, with his girlfriend, his independence. And I remember we had some tough conversations. If I was trying to tell him something that I thought I should tell him about his life, he would respond, "You don't know what you're saying, Mom. I mean, you don't know me. You have been absent for 6.5 years. I'm another person. My friends know me better than you do." And I was like, I would say, "No, that's not true. I mean, I'm your mom, and I cannot explain how I know you, but I just know you so much." And I think that today, after those 3 years of working our relationship, we have grown to be very, very close. And some months ago, we had this chat, and he said, "It's incredible because I have the impression that every time we have an argument, we get closer." And that's so true. I mean, we have been able to build this, relationship of intimacy that was for me my priority.
It's been almost 3 years since you were freed. Enough time to get used to it. Are you still affected by your ordeal?
Well, I think I will be all my life. But it doesn't mean that it is always negative. I think it's also very positive because I can compare. I'm always in black and white. Every time I see something, or every time I wake up in the morning and I'm in a bed with a roof, I'm grateful. I know that those things, we take them for granted, but I cannot take them for granted anymore.
The title of the book is Even Silence Has an End, and this is a reference to a poem by Pablo Neruda.
Yes, a beautiful poem of Pablo Neruda. His poem is about what will remain of you once you're dead. And those words were one of my father's favorite things to just, when he would always bring poems into the chat. Whenever we were saying something, he would just recite Pablo Neruda. And for me, those words are a call of hope. We are stronger than death. We can go beyond all those things that we think that are not controllable. I think with love and with our words, we can feel the world with a presence that can last after we die. Death is just a passage, I think. I really think we're eternal. But we need to know that, to just be aware that everything we do has a consequence.
I'm glad you made it through and that you're here today, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Ingrid Betancourt, who, as you heard, was held prisoner by the Colombian paramilitary group FARC for 6 years, more than 6 years, and her memoir of that time is called Even Silence Has an End. My 6 years of captivity in the Colombian jungle. It's published by Virago, and she's in Australia at the moment for the Sydney Writers' Festival. This is Life Matters on ABC Radio National.
This novel is a political act.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
I mean, novels are about our lives, our real lives.
Everybody has their different story.
Hello, I'm Amanda Smith, and I'm looking forward to one of the biggest literary events on the planet, a place for radical issues and